Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 43 of Nutanix Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. I've got Harvey back with us. Harvey, where were you last week?
Customer on-site visit.
Customer on-site visit. How'd it go?
It went well. It was cold though, but it went well.
Little hint as to where Harvey was.
Oh yeah, upstate New York.
Whoa. Okay. Yeah, that's pretty cold.
It was cold
In February.
for sure.
Nutanix oriented customer or something else?
Yes, both were Nutanix oriented customers.
Cool. That's good. Was it on the government side of the hats you wear or commercial side of the hats you wear?
Both.
You're becoming a real sales guy.
Wait, you're saying Andy only has to pay for half your expenses? That's what I heard.
Which expense can that go into?
The other half go to XenTegra Gov. There you go.
Well, so on that note, and it's going to apply here. Harvey is legacy, been a solutions architect at XenTegra, but he's now leading and running our Gov business, which is our SLED and Fed focus. So state, local, education focused, value-added reseller, as well as federal value-added reseller. Harvey's becoming a business guy.
Yes.
I'm hearing this is XenTegra Gov podcast episode number 1.
That's true. Hey, you know what? That's a good idea, Harvey. You need to start doing another podcast.
There you go, Harvey. You can just Harvey, you can run with that. I'll give that. You get the idea there.
All right. I gotta bring Jaira on that one too. And Andy I think he might be pretty good.
Andy is tapped out.
Something. Yeah. This podcast brought to you by XenTegra Gov. Something. We'll do ad reads.
Maybe, yeah, we'll just add advertisement in there. Well, Jaira's with us. Jaira, how's it going?
Howdy.
Jaira is a legend over on the Nutanix side of the house.
Infamous versus famous is a gray area.
I get on these QBRs with Nutanix sales people, and it's a little bit of in Jaira we trust. So if Jaira's on the podcast,
it must be good.
Okay.
Every week, that's a wait and see.
Yeah. Well, Harvey's XenTegra Gov and SLED tie-in, that gets us to our blog for today, and I will share my screen whenever I get smart enough to do it. Let's see here. For those all those listeners, I'll share my screen. I'll share it so we can cover it here, and then people can watch it later in the XenTegra YouTube channel. So our topic is Nutanix solutions provide data and security protection for state, local, and education organizations. This is by Harsha Kotikila. It's a blog from January 24th. I wanted to, first of all, highlight Harvey and the great things that we're doing at XenTegra Gov, going to market on the SLED and Fed side of the world. I also want to highlight things that people don't really know about SLED. We've got customers that are small city, 100 employee cities, maybe thousands, 100 to 1,000 or greater cities that we work with. They have so many different departments. They've got, water and sewer. They have police. They have this judicial, or not judicial, but they have this executive department. They've got, power, where maybe they run the power grid, or they own the power grid, or service the power grid. And they've got so many departments. When you get inside of a city or a local county government or state, of course, there's a bunch going on inside those organizations. And one of the reasons why we picked this one was to highlight that they've got security needs just like the average customer, but even more because everybody knows who they are. I mean, everybody knows, Mecklenburg County that lives in North Carolina, and the bad guys know, hey, let's go target those guys. I knew they've got money. They've got tax money coming in.
Yep. Agreed.
So, Jaira, you want to just maybe highlight, extend upon what I was talking about there when we talk about the introduction here that says modern challenges for SLED?
No, 100% right. And the need for designing, implementing like a zero trust architecture, right? Like just because you are on the network doesn't necessarily mean you are in a position of power, or you're trusted inherently more just by virtue of being on the network, right? Because that assumes that we would always be able to keep the network secure and clean and keep bad guys off of it. That's not the world we can live in, right? We have to assume, you have to assume compromise and then design assuming that principle. So yeah, and for sure, right? I've just sympathize with all of our SLED customers that must just feel like they're walking around with a target on their back all day long, for sure, right? You know, where most ransomware these days is aimed at, yeah, extracting some sort of a money from the entity being attacked. Usually there's a balance when you're in that situation of trying to recover from it quietly without making it a big deal, but there's so much potential yet for a very public failure, right? When it's a city of, county of, state of, right? It can be very hard to be a big challenge to hide that.
Well, that's the other part too. When it does happen, not if, but when it does happen, you know, all your constituents are supposed to know about it because they're your constituents. There's no hiding.
That's true. Yeah, mandatory reporting could be a thing too.
Harvey, thoughts on just the general challenge that goes on the SLED side above and beyond what our commercial?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big one is what you hit on to start with is, you know, so many different departments, so many different sets of needs, you know, down from potentially, you know, a soup kitchen up all the way to 911 call centers and, you know, police evidence rooms and things like that. Those have, you know, very differing sets of security that are needed. So you definitely need a platform that can handle all of that and not put you in a situation where you're also having to, as an IT department, handle 50 different departments, 50 different ways on 50 different platforms. That would be both very expensive in terms of the actual dollars and hardware, but also, you know, in training and being able to support something that complex.
Yeah. And we're going to talk about prevent, detection, and recovery now. One thing to highlight on the recovery side of this, you know, there's life-saving services that are involved in these organizations. They can't play hardball and wait 24, 48 hours to restore everything.
Nope.
They got to get it back up and going or people are dying.
Yeah, I mean, again, 911 call centers, and a lot of municipalities, you have different clinics or healthcare facilities as well that are under that umbrella too. So yeah, I mean, you've got people's health hanging in the balance. So time is of the essence.
I mean, think about it. You got people that might be needing critical care. You got people whose toilets won't flush. Imagine how inconvenient that would be.
Right. I mean,
that was a joke. You're supposed to laugh.
Yeah. No, agreed.
Oh man, but no, when it comes to flushing toilets, man, that's not a joke. That's perfect.
I forget what movie it was, and I'm going to say this, and it's going to be in really bad taste. But you know, if it's yellow, leave it mellow. If it's brown, flush it down. John's eyes are rolling back in his
head. That's National Lampoon. That's Vacation.
Is it? I don't remember. But
he goes to visit his brother. Yeah.
Yeah, I just I think about it every so often.
That's the value I bring here. Movie references.
Yeah. All right. The next section, as I alluded to, prevent, detect, and recovery. First section is prevents. How is Nutanix helping us prevent? Jaira?
So, or yeah, how to use Nutanix as part of your spectrum, right, of prevention. Obviously, Nutanix is a secure platform, secure both in the development, secure in the deployability, secure in the ability to self-recover back to a secure state where you can define your security baselines. But beyond that, right, it's not a product, right? It's part of a security posture. So the article calls out, strong password policies. That's both for users and for admins and for admin dashboards and privileged access, whether that's if you have the humans for it, sensitive passwords should be in an envelope in a break glass safe somewhere, and all your daily driver admin access needs to be via, multi-factor login, whether that's whatever your system is, Okta, Duo, Azure AD with, authenticator apps. For those break glass passwords, you can either, put the password in an envelope in a safe, or if you have enough people for it, I've heard of customers that will be like, you guys are team A, y'all are team B. Team A is allowed into the first half of a password. Team B is allowed into the back half of a password, right? So you got to get two people agreeing to log in together to accomplish that, right? So now no one human can get admin access to the system unmonitored. Block malware spread with microsegmentation. That one's easy, right? Nothing to install on Nutanix AHV. Flow is right there. You just simply turn it on and define your fencing policies of what should and shouldn't talk to each other. Both for, whether that could be, I can imagine that being all kinds of apps in a like a county government sense of like accounting and payroll separated from like the GIS and mapping services separated from possibly things that might connect to, power, sewer, water systems, all, separate from E911 systems, right? I could, of course, buy clusters for each of those, or with Flow, I can say they can all live on one cluster, but they can't talk to each other whatsoever, right? So that if there was any compromise, that can limit or slow the spread of those attackers laterally within the environment.
Mhm.
And then also for any EUC environment, right? If I'm hosting remote desktops, work from home, any kind of Citrix, stuff like that, wrapping a firewall around every virtual machine to say you can only get to what you need to, possibly even in an AD aware capacity, right? If Harvey logs in and he needs to get to a GIS desktop, he can only get to those things and can't get to payroll, or vice versa. If he works in payroll, he can get to that and not get to like E911 systems. So microsegmentation, really, anywhere it's possible to turn it on, definitely use that. And with Flow, it can even tell you what your existing traffic patterns are. So learn what your apps talk to, and then write policies to lock those down. The third one here, I can certainly agree with, right? Use and maintain endpoint protection, antivirus, block malware. I can't say I've got strong opinions there. I'm sure XenTegra's got much more recent experience consulting around what you probably need to use in your environment.
Yeah, we would definitely agree that you need to do that. We can talk through, different options depending on what else you need to do, just besides look for exposure points that have already been exposed, right? So yeah, we can definitely help with that.
Yeah, it's a multifaceted front, right? You got your traditional AV, you got AV that, or not AV, but you got software that kind of looks at kind of artificial intelligence types of things. You've got intrusion detection stuff from many years back. You've got intrusion detection response. You've got elements of network flow. You got all those different endpoint protection. And by the way, when you talk to XenTegra, the endpoint is the endpoint. The endpoint is also that virtual app or desktop server sitting back in the cloud, back in the data center, no matter where that data center is.
Yeah. The next one here about, employee training on cybersecurity, right? Bit of an old drum to beat on. I actually was reading a discussion thread last week with a bunch of sysadmins that were talking about, they were actually able to successfully go to HR and talk about, have like a 3-strike policy of, if this employee keeps on getting phished successfully, right, the quantifiable risk that represents to the business is greater than ever, right? And they're actually, able to start talking about policies around, hey, if we've been phished 3 times, right, or you failed the phishing tests 3 times, we can put a price tag on that employee having email access, right? Like, is it worth this employee being able to send and receive email externally versus like, I don't know, a $5 million ransomware ransom, and that being a more actionable policy nowadays more than ever, right? 10 years ago, phishing attempts were prevalent and policies had, I'm going to say, less teeth, right? Compared to now, protecting the organization is taken much more seriously because failure has consequences, right? Failure has a price tag.
Yep. Yeah, it's in the news. Everybody sees that it costs money and that it's been enabled by, in my opinion, heavily enabled by cryptocurrency and the ability to pay anonymously and walk away with the money that's worth something somewhere else.
Yeah, so I think if you don't have teeth behind your policies around, those sort of test failures, right? It's worth talking about, how do we limit our exposure
Yep.
to those attackers.
The next bullet here talks about object storage that's immutable to being changed once it's been written. We'll talk about Nutanix specific things here in a second, but that's obviously a clear place where we need to protect the company jewels.
Totally. I like that it's under prevention. It also has service area under recovery as well later on. But in this case, under prevention, I think it almost is thinking about taking your backups on the offense, right? What do I do to protect those if the bad guy was right next to them on the network? Well, okay, great. I can simply tell the backups that they are configured in such a way that they literally are not allowed to self-delete, right? Even with admin access, even with two humans logging in from A and B team or whatever I said, right. Like full warm compliance. The only way to get rid of this data is to go in the data center and physically take a sledgehammer to it. Which hopefully, if you're vulnerable to that, maybe you don't need to talk to IT consultants, right? You need to go get some beefy guys to guard your data center.
Right. The last bullet here in this section is critically analyze and scan patchwork of vectors in data centers to monitor continuous updates in areas of susceptible to attacks. We've recently started, intrusion protection, penetration test type stuff. We've also started doing something that I think is going to be a huge hit over here, where we're going to be doing VDI type of assessments, assessing the security vulnerabilities there. And a lot of times it's not, code that's not up to date. It's doors that have been left unlocked that you can't justify why they're unlocked.
Yeah, for sure. Being able to go back through the firewall rules, for example, and know the history behind, well, why did we do this again? And was that for a test, or does that need to be there for production, 8 years after it was put in? So definitely need to keep some sort of history, and also notes about different security exceptions you make, because eventually those exceptions either need to be taken away or kind of designed around so that you know what's there, why it's there, and what you're susceptible to in the end to prepare for future attacks.
Well, I like the very first word in this one that says critically. In other words,
Yes.
with a critical eye, with the look at it, like if you're paying your networking company that sets up your network to do your penetration test, or your VDI company, XenTegra, to do your VDI security tests, what's the likelihood you're going to get a straight answer?
Oh, that's right. It's like if Jira says do it, you just do it. And if Harvey says do it, you go, I don't know about that.
Well, in our case, we're specifically bringing in a third party to do these and encouraging them to find everything you can. I mean, it'll only make us all better if you do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's important too for a lot of different environments, so that you don't have to worry about one person's feelings getting hurt by the next person, or somebody having an agenda, they're out to get somebody. You just have a third party, they're balanced, they're neutral. They come in and their goal is to make sure you're either secure or let you know how you're not secure so that you can take care of it. The emotional piece of it completely comes out of it.
So let's translate the things that we just talked about in terms of things you need to be thinking about to Nutanix products and services. Gyro, let's hit the first one. Nutanix AOS, which stands for Acropolis Operating System, and Prism Management. What of those bullets do we fix with AOS and Prism Management?
Yeah, so this talks about how we take the STIGs, right? The government issued guidelines on how to secure a system. We don't just give that to you as a document for a human to read. We also write a copy that is machine readable so that you can automate that, right? So right out of the box, you can simply say, enter STIG compliance mode. That's not just a one-time event. That's also a defined baseline that if you were to go in and do something to like compromise system security, say we can key-based SSH down to password SSH. We will note that, flag it, and then reheal back to the baseline saying, I got to turn that off and go back to key-based SSH. And then, for the management layer, right, even limiting sort of bad actor admins, RBAC for role-based control around what is a given role allowed to do within the environment. So if I'm the backup guy, if I'm the database guy, I can say I can only see the parts of Prism that are pertinent to my job role.
And that's has a lot to do with the origins of Nutanix, which is this user-friendly interface, but with control.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah. All right, so the next one on here is Nutanix AHV, which stands for Acropolis Hypervisor, and Flow microsegmentation. Flow is not an acronym; it's a real word. And I am specifically emphasizing the word Acropolis when I said it before and saying it here now. I still run into people every day that use Acropolis interchangeably between these two things, these two areas, and that's just not right.
Yeah, I really don't bother correcting people too often about that. Branding is kind of always just a little bit fluid, right? I'll spend more time focusing on the problems we solve, but yeah, and like including this one, right, where delivering microsegmentation, making it easy to apply to your workloads, see what they're doing, lock down what they can and can't talk to, with nothing to install. All the code you need is there on the system from day one, and all you have to do is just set your policies in place and switch them from monitor mode to enforce mode. That's it. So couldn't be simpler.
And Harvey, I'll let you comment. I was going to jump in on something else, but go ahead.
No, just these are, I guess, very important tenets here. We're talking through prevention, and as we get to the one you just highlighted, being able to create immutable backups, the write once, read only mode, that will again be a great prevention tool. And as Jaira kind of talked through earlier, when we talk about what you do after something happens, that's also a very, very important tool, is to be able to know what you actually can trust on the other side of something happening.
Right. And then Jaira, the last one in these sets of bullets is Nutanix objects. Where does that tie into what we talked about above?
Yeah, so objects is our S3 compliant object storage solution on top of Nutanix. So you can use a node, these days you can use a node for, like, I don't know, let's call it 18, 20 different things, right? From running VMs to running containers to running file services, SMB, NFS. Objects is like one of those things you can use a node to do, right? A Nutanix node. So better living through software. So objects is our software-based solution for storing data. It lends itself to being a backup target very readily, right? It can scale to absolutely huge data sets, right? So start at whatever, 100 terabytes, grow to petabyte. Objects isn't going to blink, right? Grow right along with you, as well as, of course, the Nutanix cluster below it, right? Scale out. It's very, very aligned to that use case. But that's all the technical, whiz bang storage stuff. The security side of that is the ability to make it worm compliant. So worm being, write once, read many. The software itself will literally not allow a deletion of data if that flag has been set. So then it has to age out according to your policy, whether that's 1 year, 3 year, 7 year, whatever it is. Deletions are simply not allowed before that threshold has been reached.
And that's a no-brainer in our world, right? It doesn't matter. We don't have to put the stuff on tape and send it off site anymore. We can stick it across the aisle, or we can stick it across the aisle and across the world in another data center.
Yeah, replicate it.
Nothing can change it. Harvey, any specifics around immutable storage?
No, again, just making it so that you've got something that you can trust in the end. Again, being able to replicate that wherever you need it to live, so that you don't just have it all sitting in the same physical location. Right. And just being able to have something that no matter what, isn't going to be written to or changed based on something other, some other threat making its way into your environment.
Right. So guys, let me do this to you two guys. So you can see my screen, right? The
Yep.
listeners can't, but for effect, if I were to say this is the end of the blog, we've accomplished a lot right there.
Yes, absolutely, for sure.
These are the things we just talked about, are the no-brainers from Nutanix to help solve this security challenge, both SLED and commercial.
100%. Yeah.
But now let's move on to the next section, detection, right? So we've done prevention, now we're detection. Now you thought you were done? Thought we were going?
I thought for
we're gonna leave?
sure that was Andy stretching one blog post into 3 episodes of the podcast,
Oh no,
which I'm totally down for. Whatever you want, Andy.
just because it's Valentine's Day, right? All right, the next one is detection, and I'm gonna read the 4 bullets so you don't have to do it again, Jaira. And then we'll talk about where Nutanix plays. So leverage layer 7 threat detection tools like intrusion detection and prevention systems. I think I mentioned this earlier, to identify spurious network
Spurious,
activity. That's the one. Number 2, use a consolidated security information, consolidated security information and event management, a SIM solution with real-time analytics, analysis of security event logs, and possible orchestration capabilities. That's number 2. Number 3, employ network honeypots to augment detection. Number 4, leverage anomaly detection tools for resource usage and storage activity. If I go down to where Nutanix fits, first one talks about Nutanix Acropolis Hypervisor, AHV, and flow, service, insertion, and chaining. Jaira, help us understand where that helps solve the bullets above.
Yeah, so you can, with service insertion, right? That's like an advanced feature of Flow. Obviously, you can do a quick allow or deny at a packet level closer to the virtual machine on the virtualized NIC. But if you want to get fancier than that, obviously, maybe I want to always block, telnet. That's an easy one. I don't need to spend cycles on like a virtualized firewall, decrypting those packets, looking at the source, looking at headers, or doing like fancier like web application firewall analytics of that traffic. That's easy, right? Telnet disallowed to my web server. Maybe on actual 443 packets, I do want certain traffic patterns, or maybe all traffic redirected through smarter tooling, right? I want maybe virtualized firewalls to be allowed to decrypt that traffic, look at who it's from, see what's happening in there, prevent injection attacks. So that's another great use case for Flow as part of our microseg solution to allow for even more advanced functionality, right? So we can work with virtualized firewall vendors, application firewalls to do more functionality, give you more functionality and more security around your traffic and your workloads, traffic flows.
Harvey, comments?
I'll reserve till you get to the last one, but I'm watching this picture build, and I just want to make sure at the end that everybody sees the picture we're building here.
Okay. The next bullet as to how Nutanix solves these challenges is files analytics, Nutanix Prism Ops, and XPlay. I can fathom what files analytics. Driver, what is all this stuff? What is this stuff?
Yeah, so some really creative, collaboration here, right, among the services. So files analytics watches the traffic on Nutanix hosted file servers, right? So Nutanix Files being our software defined scale out NAS offering, right? So it can host your SMB shares, your NFS shares. When data lives on those, then we can generate metadata about your data, right? You're storing whatever, Word documents, PDFs, family vacation videos, whatever. We can watch who's accessing those. What does normal look like? What do anomalies look like, right? So, hey, it's 3 a.m. and somebody's logged in from an accounting desktop coming through these file shares. That's an anomaly, right? We need to throw an alert about that can then be acted on. So we know that's not not normal behavior there. And then Prism Ops can do the same thing for like virtual machines, right? It'll actually learn what does normal look like for your VMs in terms of like memory consumption, CPU consumption, and then can also alert for anomalies. So without you as a human needing to define X percentage of thresholds or so many megahertz of what does steady state look like, it'll just learn and baseline against your own VM behavior and then be able to alert to you based off of anomalies like that. And then crossplay is it's our like codeless automation platform. So you can have lots of, we call them playbooks defined. A playbook is almost like if you've used like the web service, if this, then that. It's like, all point and click automation and chaining of like, I want you to take this and do this and strip out this, third word and email that to me and send me a Slack message or Teams or whatever I want. I can use that for like time-based triggers, on-demand triggers, or in this case, more critically, alert-based triggers. So when I get an alert from the system about X is happening, right, then I want you to do whatever. So now, you can say, hey, my critical web servers, web traffic is up 10x in the last hour, right? Is that worth, as a human, me checking on? And I can get that as an email, as a Teams message, Slack message, PagerDuty, whatever fits into your ecosystem. So it brings the detection all the way right to your front door.
So Gyro, are these all things that are part of Nutanix or things that Nutanix enables that third parties come in and actually do?
I'm going to say both.
Okay.
To that. We have a lot of the code closer to the virtual machine, closer to the workload, closer to the metal. We're not like the app on your smartphone that alerts you about something, but we work with that app.
Yeah. All right, Harvey. I can't believe you're excited about number 3 the way you seem to be, but we're going to.
Not so. You were kind of hitting on my point just a second ago before I got to it, but I like all of this. Well, to Gyro's point, not every single piece of it, but all of this that we've talked about so far, these are things that are built into the platform, things you can use, things that you can have, day one of implementation. So I guess for those so far that have listened to where we've gotten so far and you don't have all of these tools in place and you're wondering how in the world you can get all of them, and the thinking that it's 15 vendors is the answer, just being able to do this out of just the Nutanix platform that you have is, I think that's a very big deal that can definitely change an organization's security footprint really from day one. Just being able to plan this out and implement these pieces that you have access to, I think would be a very, very good change in security posture.
Here's one way to look at this. You can move everything to an IaaS, one of the big cloud hyperscalers, and you can get all this stuff. But most of us can't do that, move everything. So then we got to go to some colo. We got to go to some partner other than the public cloud. We got to do our own premises data center because of the universal layer of Nutanix and all this, whether it's public cloud, colo, private data center, private cloud, all these things become doable, and they become doable in the same way.
Right.
And so the third bullet here is about a SIEM, a security information and event management system that can easily tie into all this and keep you from having to look under every object to find stuff, and a place you can go look to find everything that's being reported and try to make sense of it.
Yeah, and I don't want to oversimplify or unintentionally trigger any of my friends in security who could describe like what the SIEM is doing it way better than I could. But like in my simplified view of the world, it's a record of what happened and what's normal and what's weird, right? And that basically is like one dimension of like a big data problem of like capture this fire hose of information, look for outliers and anomalies, hopefully intelligently alert about that. But at that base layer, right, as a big data problem, Nutanix is like uniquely suited to do that, right? Because we have the compute for the actual computation that needs to occur, in the form of a virtual machine and vCPUs. But we have the performance storage, right? They have to capture the data, be able to ingest it, be able to analyze it, be able to search on it when you search for like occurrences of events and so forth, or need to go review your log data. but storing everything in a performant way forever is crazy expensive. And, public cloud vendors would love you to do that.
Right.
Nutanix says, hey, we can do stuff like fancy all flash nodes for your ingest and whatever you want, like last 90 days, perhaps. But if you need to maintain years worth of logs, hey, we also have a great solution for that with stuff like our object storage solution, which a lot of security vendors can say, we will, at the application level, gracefully age out data from the hot tier down to the cold tier, keeping everything performant, secure, and economical, and you have full governance over all that data.
Right. It's a platform, right? That all the stuff can tie into. And watching Nutanix go from Acropolis operating system running on top of ESX to the evolution to Acropolis hypervisor, and then all the things, the services that have come along with it. As you guys start to solve cloud-like challenges that don't have to be in the cloud, it's been fun to watch. All right, last section of this is recovery, and the bullets go like this: create snapshot and replication plans, replicate data to one or more locations as part of business continuity and disaster recovery. I've never seen this acronym before, but BCDR, putting those two together, because everybody talks about them as if they're one and the same, and they're definitely not. But if that's what somebody's talking about, let's give them both and just give them one acronym. That's interesting. I like that. Follow the 3-2-1 rule for backup, at least 3 copies, 2 backups, 1 copy should be located offsite. That goes back to those days of waiting for the Iron Mountain guy to show up every day. I did lots of that. Handing the box full of tapes. Sometimes check and see if they work, sometimes not. Use automation and frequently test your recovery, right? So I don't know. I know we brought it up multiple times on this podcast. I'm glad you got a business continuity. Well, I'm glad you got a DR plan. I'm glad there's some element of business continuity in your day-to-day. How often do you test it? If you're doing business continuity right, you're actually testing it live every day if you're doing it the modern way. But the DR side of it, being able to proactively test that without actually doing it, and then actually doing it a couple times a year, those are the challenges that real consulting firms need to have for their customers. The Nutanix answers to this starts with number 1, Nutanix AOS. Jira, how is Nutanix Acropolis operating system? I'm going to try to translate that real quick. So that's the Nutanix Acropolis operating system, which is really the storage magic and all this, which if I try to dummy it down a little, is really the vSAN piece of what makes Nutanix. I know you guys don't necessarily like somebody calling it a vSAN because it's way beyond that. But that's what Acropolis operating system means to me.
It's solving the need for highly available storage, right? In a scale out fashion, kind of no matter what the workload is, right? Whether it's, right to your point where we started as simple as a virtual machine, or as fancy as containerized workloads, block storage, file storage, object storage. If the world invents a new kind of storage, I'm sure we'll evolve to support that too one day.
Right. Harvey, it's fair to say that the Acropolis operating system portion of this that's the foundation. That's the cornerstone for all that's happened since.
Yes, it is the magic. It is the secret sauce. It is the differentiation. So it is what makes the big difference between Nutanix and a lot of the other solutions out there that can't do as much or be as wide ranging as far as the workloads covered that Nutanix can be.
In the place where we fit into like the 3-2-1 rule specifically, right? 3 copies of data. I think one of those should probably be, a Nutanix snapshot on the primary cluster, right? Where it's immutable, right? Can't be changed after it's created. And it's going to be on the spectrum of recovery, the quickest option, right? Obviously, if I have a site denial event, if I have a physical event, if the sprinklers go off in the data center, also pro tip, don't have sprinklers in your data center. But if that cabinet is physically down, then I can't use that snapshot, right? But short of a cluster denial event, that snapshot's gonna be the quickest way to get up and going. If I have a dropped table, a human caused event, a VM deletion, some sort of a misconfiguration, right? definitely have backups as well, but keep one copy, right? And I like the way this article writes it in terms of like match your business recovery objectives, but basically, profile your VMs, right? Find the important stuff, keep snapshots of them on the primary cluster more often, maybe retained for longer. Nutanix snapshots, right? They're taken instantly. They don't cause stun. They don't cause, VM slowdowns as you retain them. So keep those. They're right there built in as part of the platform. Beyond that, of course, then get into your BCDR. I think is a great acronym for it, right? Because I don't always have to fail over to recover. I just need to get the business back up and running back as quick as possible. The automation, right? We have another blog post. I think we did an episode about it that talked about using our Leap, right, which is that our orchestrated VM recovery, with runbooks and non-impactful out-of-band testing, right? I could have that test run every morning at 3 a.m. and then just email me with the DR test success results, right? I can just go into work every day knowing that my DR plan was tested last night while I slept and we passed the test.
Right.
So let's talk Leap and what Leap does. Like Leap, when I first started understanding Nutanix, my first thought went to DR and how Nutanix could offer up a cloud that included that had Nutanix in it, and we could easily use that as a replication target. That's Leap, right? That's what the Nutanix cloud has become, which is this no-brainer place to at least do your DR.
Yeah, if you're a customer without a DR site today and no desire to invest in one, A, you're in great company, and B, that's an easy problem to solve. Absolutely, you can basically rent, if that's the right word. You can get a DR as a service solution through Nutanix, through the Leap service that we offer. If you have clusters in your primary and secondary data centers, Leap's also the software you can run on-prem to get the same outcome, right? About VM replication, runbook recovery, out-of-band testing, that full automation for that stack.
Harvey, any firsthand knowledge and experience using Leap for the DR side of it?
Not me personally as far as recovering from it, but helping customers at least get it in place. Yes. Conversations about it. Absolutely. Definitely. Again, like Jared mentioned, if you're a customer who does not have any sort of backup DR site today, this is definitely a way for you to do it. It's an affordable way to do it, and it's pretty easy to implement and get going. Where you have nothing now, this allows you to both check the box, but check it in a way that you're able to actually utilize, test, and be able to actually say something for,
right.
Not just check the box.
Right.
I think you get full credit for that answer, Harvey. Setting it up, that's the important part, right? Like, you don't get extra points for actually suffering the outage that makes you glad you did set it up. Hopefully that's what we want for everyone, right? Is you have the protection in place, capability to recover, you test it, and never actually need to maybe do a full-blown, full smash recovery.
Well, for me, Leap is that story that came full circle, but then also watching Nutanix doing what they're doing with the clusters on Azure, clusters on AWS, maybe clusters on GCP. It's those types of things, building out redundancy, but for people who just need that DR scenario, check a few boxes, pay a few bills, nothing compared to paying a SunGuard bill kind of thing. And now you got it covered. And then when you need to test it, you can. It's powerful.
Yeah, I mean, SunGuard, blast in the past there, right? Like, right. It's recovery that doesn't involve like backing up a semi, into the parking lot and hooking into the power grid, right? It's software defined recovery to the target of your choice, right? So that can be your cluster to Nutanix. That can be your cluster to your other cluster. It can be Nutanix, your cluster to public cloud, right? Where you can also just run a Nutanix cluster, right? So it's really, you're in control of what your recovery environment should look like.
I went, before this world existed, I just implemented VMware for the second time. in a data center, and I went to SunGard to do my DR test for the new company I was working for, Fortune 500 company. And the servers they gave me were so old, I couldn't even install the OS on the servers, much less a hypervisor and all the OS on top of it to rebuild the environment. I was literally there an hour. There were people walking around from Hurricane Katrina 10 years earlier, still walking around the data center. I was there an hour. The stuff wouldn't work. I just left and went out to a club with my buddy. Like, that was the DR test. And I got back, and on Monday, my boss said, how'd it go? I said, fine. That's all we ever talked about.
Okay. I mean, we should probably add an unwritten step here of have a more rigorous DR test than that.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
But I think we were spending 10,000 a month or something for the junk I got when I got there. I was leaving anyway. I was like, this is insane. These guys have no idea what they were just checking boxes. This is the same place that the business continuity side of that plan was give everybody a laptop.
I mean, I can't think of a better segue than to say that Leap has DR test auditing features. It will tell you what it did during the test and give you a PDF that you can send to somebody that cares about how the test go. Thanks for the tee up there, Andy. That was fantastic.
I'm not proud of everything that's happened. Not everything, some things, not everything. All right, last one is Nutanix Mine for backup. What is Nutanix Mine doing to help us with the recovery side of the objective here?
Yeah, I mean, I think this calls it out, right, is turnkey data backup and archiving, right? So if you are adopting Nutanix, maybe you're switching to AHV, you're open to maybe a new backup provider, you could talk to Harvey, talk to Nutanix and say, hey, what's the easiest way to just drop in my new backup target, software to get there, all that good stuff. And mine is the packaged, Nutanix for storage, as well as our software partners for the backup provider and like agents if you need them, all in one single cluster, right? So it's probably going to use our object storage under the covers, and then things like our mine partners like Veeam, Haiku, Commvault as the actual software that is going to pick up your data, whether it's, if you say I've got physical SQL over there, or I've got VMs over here, whatever, right? Mine is that, kind of all in one-stop shop for both backup software and storage in one cluster.
Right. Yeah, I know our team is using it in order to work with Haiku, leveraging mine underneath the covers, and Haiku turns around and adds additional value on top of that.
Couldn't be simpler.
Yeah. Harvey, anything on Nutanix Mine?
I'm just looking at the full strategy there, and I can't get this thought out of my head, so you'll have to forgive me. But snapshots, backup, DR, otherwise known as oh no, and oh snap.
It's a spectrum.
It is.
Spectrum. Sorry. All right. So Nutanix, so the last section talks about Nutanix solutions, key to security posture. I can't think of a better way to tie it together than to talk about what I've talked about multiple times on this call, and that is cloud-enabled technologies are allowing us to solve a lot of these problems. Nutanix is the cloud-enabled technology that can be anywhere you need it to be. That's what's been so awesome about watching Nutanix journey here.
Yeah, absolutely. We find a lot of customers in SLED and Fed who are we'll just say not as excited to go run all of their information to a public cloud. So this gives them a lot of the same functionality, but being able to do that and still host it where they want to host it. So that is definitely a big one. You've got the STIGs we talked about earlier. You've got a bunch of the DoD type approved products, some of the certifications that are listed here. These are definitely very, very important pieces for the Nutanix platform that people can use and have, what they know to be a trusted solution, one that's compliant with the standards that they need, and something that they would be able to actually use and, really be able to just trust it. You've got everything built into this platform and everything built into this system from, again, we just went through protection, backup, and recovery. So you've got everything that you need to make all of those pieces happen the way that you need them to.
Well, you spoke up there and you brought the acronym SLED back up. I had forgotten we were talking about SLED. I mean, it's universal across.
It is. It is.
Jaira, anything else on the security posture that can be enabled through a Nutanix platform?
What I think the bow I would tie around the whole thing is we've talked about, virtualization, talked about storage, management for all of that, security as part of the DNA of that whole, every layer of that stack, microsegmentation, backups, DR replication. And when I, if for no other reason I do those things within the Nutanix flavored fashion, I can call one number for support and get a world-class support experience for every single layer of that stack, right? So how many vendors did I just pull out that can't be pointing fingers at one another when I need to make this all work for my, perhaps, more rigorous DR event than we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So simplicity
I'm glad you brought that up. I said the word platform intentionally, and you expanded upon it. You got to have a platform or two that are your bread and butter, and then things you add to it can work with that platform. Having one place to go get the things you need, that you can have the right customer service, and then add, additional things to that, but having that one reliable place.
Or I call in with a question about one part of that stack, but the person I'm talking to understands everything else that I'm using there,
Yeah.
right? And you're not just piling a bunch of products on top of each other and hoping it all works together. And you are
Right.
kind of maybe in partnership with XenTegra, you become the integrator. No, they're already integrated, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think that has a lot to do with, I'm listening to the Outliers book from, I'm listening to the Outliers book.
That's Gladwell, right?
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell. And he talks about, sometimes it's just having the right tools and skills at the right time. Nutanix coming of age in this cloud platform world prevents them from having to bolt a bunch of ugly stuff together.
I think it's that. I think, honestly, my hat's off to our, honestly, our data engineers back in the day, right? Like Nutanix day one saying, what can we do with software-defined storage that we can snapshot, replicate, recover from, roll back to, offer immutability on the data. It sounds trite, probably coming from a reformed former storage array seller. The data is kind of the most important thing, right? It's like why we're all here. It's why the applications exist. Like, yeah, virtualization is great. Recovering them is great. You couldn't do one part without the others. But at the end of the day, without data integrity, without data agility, and the ability to do fun things with the data, we wouldn't be a suitable platform for backups. We shouldn't be trusted with your first instance of the data in the application itself, let alone the backups, right? We wouldn't be able to do database automation like we can with Era without a crazy, crazy smart data platform below all of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the AOS piece is the engine, and everything else can be bolted around a really fast, strong, and reliable engine. You can do a whole lot with that.
Yes.
Well, gentlemen, it's 5:06 on Valentine's Day. I'm already in trouble. I need to leave. If you noticed, I was doing a lot of texting during some of this. I gotta go. Have a good night.
Yes, sir.
Y'all are gonna be my excuse for tonight too. So
Nice.
See you guys.